What's up, guys? Toad back with you as usual, Sunday morning. Thanks to all of you who were in the NFL show last night. Fun times as usual. I gave out 2 plays on the NFL video last night. I'll tell you real quickly. Indianapolis Colts plus 7.5, Rams plus 3. I mean, we can look at those games quickly. I'm not going to go into deep analysis again with that, but let me see if I can. Can I even share my screen here? I don't even know if I can do it. Come on, man. StreamYard just fucking up as usual. All right. Let me see here. I'm going to get this screen up here, and we can look at NFL. Just want to make sure that my reads are kind of still correct here. Lions are looking very public with less of the cash still, so that still looks good to me. And then same thing with the Eagles-Rams. So I'm liking those leans right now. Or I'm liking those plays, I should say, because I played them. So let's do it, man. Let's get it done. You got to find a 3 on the Rams, though. Just make sure that you can find a straight 3, even if you have to lay like minus 115 or something. And one thing that I will point out real quickly, by the way, is that the Detroit Lions, not only is this a sandwich spot, but this is like the down spot they have remaining in their schedule. Because look at this, man. They play Indy on the road, which is the game that means less out of all of these games. Then they have Thanksgiving against the Chicago Bears, Green Bay, Buffalo, Chicago again, San Francisco, and Minnesota. That's their remaining schedule for the entire season. So which one of these games, if you think they're going to not bring a full effort, which one of these games do you think it's going to be? Yeah, I'm going to bank on it being this road out-of-conference game against a below 500 or exactly 500. What are they now? I don't even know. Below 500 Indianapolis team. So that's what I'm going to go with that. I'm off of a 7-3 day yesterday, which I'll take it, obviously. 3-0 in the NHL. My NHL is still killing it. 2-1 in college football. 2-1 in... Well, I lost the NBA game. Then I think I was 2-1 in college basketball as well. So it was a nice day yesterday for me there, man. So let's talk about today. I got, besides those NFL plays, I have 4 college basketball plays, 1 NBA play, and 1 NHL play. Oh, I have a play in the 1 NHL game. So let's take a look at men's college basketball, man. I mean, it's already underway. Portland and Princeton is already happening in this Myrtle Beach. I think this isn't the Myrtle Beach. Yeah, it is. The Myrtle Beach Invitational. Yeah, Princeton. This one, my read was kind of that Princeton may be in a bounce back spot, even though they're probably not going to care about being in a 7th place game in this preseason tournament. It doesn't matter to them, but they've really underperformed in this tournament, losing to Wright State and Texas State. I think both as favorites, most likely. So I thought that maybe they would just be angry enough that they were going to come and just win this game against Portland, but who knows, because Portland might still have a reason to show up there. St. John's, Georgia is going to be a little bit of an interesting one coming up at 11 a.m. In about 12 minutes from now, that game is going to start, which is in one of these other tournaments, I think. I don't know. That's in the Bahamas tournament there. And then Hampton Boise is in the Cayman Islands tournament. So those are the games that are coming up in about 10 minutes. But I'm not playing any of these. My earliest game that I actually have a play on, which I'll get into in a minute, is at 1 p.m. Eastern. As far as these games are concerned, I mean, St. John's, they're up from 5.5 to 6, 84% of tickets, 92% of the cash. So the money does look like it's coming in on St. John's, even though they are also public, because the public's going to come in and just look at the rankings and think, oh, well, St. John's is the better team. You're telling me they're the better team, although in this case, yes, they are. But they're also coming off that barn burner game against Baylor, where I thought they weren't going to be in a good spot after that, after losing their first game in a real tough double overtime game like that. But they came out and they just destroyed Virginia, and I lost money on that. So now maybe they look a little bit too good off of that win. So I don't know, man. But then on the Georgia side, I think Georgia just took their first loss in a tough game against Marquette. So this is a tough read here, man, because both teams are in spots where I would kind of want to look to fade them. So I'm not going to do it, but it looks like the money is coming in on St. John's. I'm not going to get involved in that game, though, obviously. I don't know which games on the slate I even actually found it to be that interesting. I mean, Miami VCU is also, I think, in this Myrtle Beach tournament here. Miami, they just lost 2 games to Drake and Oklahoma State, and I think Miami was favored in both of those games. So they might be kind of angry here and looking to bounce back, and they're they've fallen to the 7th place game. This is in the Shriners Children's Charleston Classic, actually. My mistake. Too many tournaments in South Carolina right now. Is VCU, they're off of some tough games there. They lost close to Seton Hall and Nevada. So those are big games. But then again, if you look, VCU was actually a big favorite against Seton Hall. And they got upset. But then this Nevada game, that was like a very competitive line there. A very tough game, competitive game. So VCU coming off of that, I would lean to Miami slightly in that one because of that. And I think Miami might be in the angrier mood after how they've looked in this tournament so far. VCU is actually favored up from 2.5 to 3. So that's kind of my issue with this, is that everybody's going to think Miami is the better of these two teams, right? Because they're an ACC team. They've been in the tournament repeatedly. Recently, everybody knows the name Miami. And VCU just kind of flies under the radar as an A10 team. But it looks like in this case, so even though the odds makers are telling you VCU is actually the better team, which is pretty surprising. They do have 71% of the tickets on them and only 62% of the cash. So they actually do look public, which, again, that does surprise me quite a bit. By the way, I will point out because I have it, just because I noticed I have my Action Network tab open here. After yesterday, I'm at a new high on the year, man. So I have a decent amount of padding now. I don't want to jinx myself, but it looks like I am in line to probably have a winning year at the end of this. I just hope the last month doesn't go totally to shit. But after a few like big days in a row, 5-1 Thursday, 3-2 Fridays, whatever, then 7-3 yesterday, I'm at a new high on the entire year. It's been a roller coaster year, but it looks like I am right now. If it finished right now, I'd win. I'd be up like 3,000, which is, you know, obviously not close to my best year, but it's something that I would at least accept. I would take it. Rutgers, this is an interesting game, man. Rutgers, they're undefeated. They're ranked 24th in the country, but they really haven't played anybody. I mean, Wagner, St. Peter's, Monmouth, Merrimack. I mean, they're not the worst mid-major teams, but they're all mid-major teams still. So they haven't really been challenged yet. And up next, they're going to have whatever this early season tournament, I keep saying preseason, but this early season tournament is, where they're going to face Notre Dame, and then they got Alabama right after that, and then after like a break for Thanksgiving probably or whatever, then they got Ohio State, Penn State, Seton Hall, Princeton. So if there's any game they're going to overlook in the remaining schedule, it's going to be this game against Kennesaw, man, and it's their first true road game, so I was looking to potentially take the points with Kennesaw here. Kennesaw's not a bad team in the Conference USA either. They moved into the Conference USA. I think they were in the A-Sun prior to that, but they've beaten, kind of some cupcakes here. They've only faced 3 Division I teams. They lost close, but it was having to go to the Pacific Coast, I guess, to face Cal Baptist. So I'm not going to really blame them for that. And then beating Presbyterian. Presbyterian's been playing kind of above their pay grade, but they've actually been playing decently early on in the season. So that's not a horrible win there. And it was a dominant win pretty much for Kennesaw State there. And then they beat Abilene Christian, who's been a pretty decent team as well. So Kennesaw is not really a horrible team. And this is going to be like one of the biggest games that they have this entire season, man. This is the only game I think they have against a bigger conference opponent all year, with Rutgers coming into their place. So I haven't played this one, but this was close to making my card where I would take the points with Kennesaw here, but the market looks in disagreement with it. It's up from 7.5 to 11 on Rutgers, 58% of the tickets, 67% of the cash on Rutgers. I don't know if maybe this might be just a numbers play where the numbers guys might be looking. I don't know what KenPom's rankings have, but maybe he has Rutgers like so far ahead of, no, he doesn't really. He has Rutgers being a way overrated team. He's got them at 68th in the country, so not even close to the top 25. Unless he has Kennesaw like way bad, but I don't really think so. They have 178. That's not terrible. Kennesaw does like to push the pace. They play a really fast pace, 15th in tempo, and Rutgers, I know, does not. Rutgers is kind of middle of the pack, 152. So Kennesaw might start running in this game and try to throw Rutgers either element that way too. So I do lean to Kennesaw State still in that one based on everything I just said, but it's not a play for me. But I would look to take the points with Kennesaw in that one. Let's go to my first play just because I'm going through kind of an order here of what my thoughts were. First play up is South Florida -2.5. I'm going to play this game. The market read looks good on all of my plays here, man. Let me see. South Florida. Let's see what we got. I thought I just saw it. What? I hate how, I don't even know how pregame has these teams listed here. There it is, South Florida. They flipped from a favorite from 1 to 2.5 with juice. So this is one that you kind of got to get on, man. Obviously, I would have rather had the better number and lay a price that's under a bucket. But if I beat the closing number, I'm still not too dissatisfied in that. They're a little bit public with 67% of tickets, but 85% of the cash also coming in on South Florida. I mean, the public might remember kind of what they did I think it was last year where they were kind of playing way out of their minds, over their heads, basically. And I kept saying this is an overrated South Florida team, overperforming last year, and they just kept doing it. And I think I don't think they made the tournament, right? They missed out on the tournament. I don't remember. I forget, actually, but it looked like they were in line to maybe make the tournament, and they just missed. But everybody kind of remembers the name. They know South Florida's in a bigger conference than Wright State is, because Wright State's in the Horizon. South Florida's in, the American Athletic, I think. So public's still coming in on them, but the cash looks like it is coming in heavily on South Florida. I think there is a reason for it. As I'm saying, I'm playing this game, so I don't want the line to get too out of control, though, so I would try to lay 2.5 or better on this one. Obviously, I would rather lay below the bucket at 2.5, like I said, but whatever. South Florida, I mean, this game is in the Myrtle Beach Invitational as well. This is the third place game now because both of these teams lost, but look at how these teams lost. South Florida lost to Middle Tennessee, who's a pretty decent team. So, yeah, that was a big game, kind of a tough game, sort of, for South Florida, I guess. But, I mean, they lost the game. And look at the stats in this game. I mean, South Florida, they played a bad game. They got blown out in this game. So, they might be a little bit angry about this, even though, yeah, they did try to come back. So, they did put in an effort to come back. So, am I a little bit concerned about that? Maybe. But look at what Middle Tennessee did in this game, dude. The game was pretty close otherwise, but they shot 57.6 from the floor and 52.2% from three-point range. That is a total outlier. You're not going to see something like that again for the most part. 12 for 23 from three-point range. I don't think that's going to happen again, man. So, against South Florida, I should say, even though does that mean they're bad at defending the three? I don't know, but that's a bit of an outlier game there for South Florida, man. So, I'm going to look at this and think they're going to maybe progress a little bit in this game. And the odds makers are telling you that South Florida is indeed the better team here. And though you're looking at a 3-3 team as a favorite on a neutral against a 4-3 team, and South Florida is at least more used to kind of playing in the southeastern U.S. at the very least as well. I don't know if that really matters at this point, but Wright State, look at what they did in their last game when they lost to get knocked out of this tournament. They were coming off beating Princeton as a 7.5-point underdog. Big win there for Wright State. And then they played Bradley as another underdog. Bradley off to a nice start this season. 6.5-point underdog. Wright State playing back-to-back games as underdogs. And they almost won both games. They grinded this game out, and they were in this game the whole way pretty much, all the way basically to the final buzzer. They had chances to win this game, and they shot a kind of high three-point percentage, 47.4%. They got out-rebounded. They wound up losing the game, of course, but a very close game. And when you're stepping up game after game like this, I think you're going to wind up not continuing to have that steam. I think they're going to run out of steam in this game. So I'm going to take South Florida in that game. That's the first game. Next game, let me see. I don't know if it's the next game. I was going to talk about a couple other of these games, maybe. Well, I don't know. I mean, Villanova, Maryland is at least a big conference game, but I don't know if there's that much to say about that game. Maryland up from 4.5 to 6.5 with juice. So a lot of money looks like it's coming in on Maryland. 92% of tickets, 98% of the cash. And I don't know if this is a situation where the public is going to think, oh, I'm getting value with Villanova because I know their name, but Maryland's off to a 4-1 start. The odds makers are telling you they're the better team over Villanova. This is a neutral site game in Newark, New Jersey. So it actually is closer to Villanova. And Maryland is still up to a 6.5-point favorite here. So odds makers are telling you this is not a great Villanova team this year, and they weren't last year. Villanova looked quite good and just absolutely annihilating Pennsylvania, but Pennsylvania may be pretty bad this year, man. I mean, they're looking like they're not one of the better Ivies this year. So that's a game where Penn State usually steps up to as an in-state little brother, and they did not have it at all. Maryland is also coming off a big game as well, though, I believe. No, they're coming off a blowout win, over Canisius. So both teams are coming off blowing out inferior opponents in this one. So there's not a whole lot you can take away from that. But this is kind of a situation where the market is kind of just speaking here and telling you that Maryland is the better team. But if you do like Maryland here, you're obviously losing out on some value there, getting to the party late there. What's up, Andrew? Thank you for voting for me as best host there. I don't know if that fight against Todd is actually going to happen, but I mean, I am taller than he is. I'm pretty sure I outweigh him, and I'm younger than he is, so there's something really wrong if I don't win that. But the problem is I'm built backwards, so I don't know. Let me see. What else we got here on the slate? I feel like I always say this, but I mean, we got some other kind of big games here going on with UCF LSU. I mean, this is kind of interesting. This is another one. This is in that Appalachian tournament, whatever it is, Greenbrier tip-off. This is the third place game because both of these teams also lost. UCF lost to Wisconsin, so they're coming off a step-up game where they lost, but they lost kind of badly in that game, so I don't know if that's really going to hang them over into this game. And they're still probably going to be focused when it's LSU that they're playing. LSU had a bit of a tougher game against Pitt, and Pitt, as I'm going to talk about in a minute, is better than you think they are, and they're kind of flying under the radar. So tough game for LSU there. So I don't know which way I would lean in this one. I would just kind of defer to the market. And LSU's down from 2-1. UCF, 50% of the tickets evenly split and 71% of the cash on UCF. So the market is kind of strongly indicating on the UCF side there. And it looks suspicious, right, to have an SEC team like LSU. I know this isn't football, but LSU only laying 1 against Central Florida looks a little bit suspicious, I think. So it looks like South Florida may be the side in that one. They're both 4-1, though, but LSU is coming off the more difficult game out of the two teams in the last game that they played. Oklahoma State, Nevada is in whatever, that Charleston Classic, whatever, for children's cancer or something. Oklahoma just beat Miami. Oklahoma State, just beat Miami. That's a pretty big game, but playing Nevada is also a step-up game, but Nevada might consider that to be a bit of a bigger game because they're playing a Big 12 team in Oklahoma State, even though Oklahoma State actually has been the worst basketball team out of the two. So I don't know which one of these teams is actually going to consider themselves to even be the underdog in this game. But the odds makers are telling you Nevada's the better team, as I was just alluding to. Nevada's down from 6.5 to 6. 64% of tickets and 81% of the cash on Nevada, though. So even though the line has ticked down a little bit, it does look like more of the cash may actually be coming in on the Nevada side. And it's a tough read here, man, because like I said, both teams are kind of in a spot where they're coming off a tough game where I think I would look to maybe fade them, but I don't know. So obviously I'm not playing that game, but it's just another one of those interesting games there. Florida State at UMass. This is a game where I would maybe look to fade Florida State, but the market doesn't look in agreement with that. I mean, this is whatever this tournament is. This is the Basketball Hall of Fame tip-off tournament in Uncasville, Connecticut. So it is closer to UMass, but I mean, Florida State, they travel. They're obviously the better team, but Florida State, they beat Hofstra and Temple, while UMass in this tournament lost to both of those teams. So the public is going to come in and only look one way in this one. They're only going to look to Florida State here. But Florida State isn't laying that many points, up from 5 to 5.5, 90% of tickets, 95% of the cash. It does look like the cash is still coming in on the Florida State side, but Florida State is laying less of a price than you would think, man. So this looks a little bit misleading to me. I mean, you're looking at common opponents here and saying, oh, Florida State should blow out UMass in this game because they're 5-1. UMass is 1-4. UMass just lost to those same two teams that Florida State just beat. Those aren't really bad teams. So, I mean, this UMass team is not, I don't think they're really as bad as they look so far off those two games. So I would disagree with maybe where some of the cash is coming in on this one. I would actually agree with fading the public in that one and look towards the UMass side, but I'm not going to do that, obviously. Mercyhurst and Air Force is just kind of an interesting one where you got a 4-2 Mercyhurst team. This is in the Cal Classic in Colorado Springs, Colorado, though. So this is actually at Air Force's home arena, so I don't know why this is listed as a Cal Classic. I was like, oh, this is in California, but no, it's at Air Force. Air Force is 1-4 against this 4-2 Mercyhurst team, but as you can see, Air Force is actually a giant favorite in this game. Down from 10 to 9, though. I don't see the percentages yet, although it looks like the cash percentage may come in on the Air Force side. I would lean to Air Force here just because this looks like such a misleading line. Like, how could a 1-4 team be laying a price like this against a 4-2 team? It looks like one of those games where the recreational bettor who doesn't really know much might come in and say, oh, it's the team with the way better record as a huge underdog. I'll take that. But I would say, yeah, hold on a minute, because the odds makers are telling you Air Force is obviously the better team here. Mercyhurst, they're in the NEC, which is the worst conference in college basketball, and I know they're off to the best start out of any of these teams record-wise, but Mercyhurst, they're new to Division I, I'm pretty sure. This is their first season in Division I. 2 of their wins are against non-Division I teams. They had a close win against Morgan State, who's not very good, and they beat Canisius, so you just saw what Canisius just did against Maryland, losing by like almost 70 points or whatever. So this is not an impressive slate so far from Mercyhurst. And the 2 games that they played where they stepped up at all, they lost to George Washington and Columbia. Although Columbia does look like one of the better Ivies this year, which is crazy. It would be really wild to see Columbia be the team that makes the tournament from out of nowhere. Coming from the Ivy this year, that would be insane. Because, I mean, I don't know when the last time they would have made the tournament would have been, if ever. But then Mercyhurst, the other thing that makes this worse for Mercyhurst is I think they've stayed on the East Coast this whole time this season, and now they're going out to Air Force. They're having to play in elevation in mountain time. That's a weird spot for them, man. That is not an easy spot for them to be in. So I would look to the Air Force side for those reasons if you're going to look into that game and potentially play that game. UC Riverside, I know this is gonna wind up being a long video too, man. I could just talk forever. I talk way too much about college basketball here. UC Riverside, they're coming off really a monster upset on the road in overtime. They beat Colorado State as an 11.5 point underdog. That's a huge win for Riverside. So I think that puts them in a big letdown spot, man. I mean, even Mountain West teams don't easily go into Colorado State and beat them, and UC Riverside went in there and beat them, and they lost the turnover battle and still beat them. And you can see some real outlier percentages here, kind of, for Colorado State not shooting as well as they normally would, but Riverside also dominated the boards against them, which I don't know how that even happened. But Riverside, well, this is really more of the outliers. The 41.7% from 3 that Riverside shot, that's not really a sustainable percentage, and Colorado State shot a little bit unsustainably low as well. So that sets up Riverside to be in a letdown spot, but I'm not going to quite get there because, unfortunately, they're playing Alcorn State, who are one of the worst teams in Division I would say. And Alcorn State, I mean, they're in one of the weakest conferences. They're in, what are they, in the MEAC? No, they're in the SWAC, excuse me, because Alcorn State is in the South. That's where Steve McNair played, by the way. It was the only time Alcorn State sports was any good was when Steve McNair played. But no, their football team is actually better than their basketball team. But their basketball team's off to an 0-6 start. They're a 17.5 point dog in this game. I mean, I don't want to touch it. And they're coming off a game where they stepped up a bit on the road against Washington. It looks like they're playing a third road game in a row out in unfamiliar territory. So I'm just going to stay away from this. And they played pretty tough in this game, actually, for the first more than half of the game, really. Like halfway through the second half, they were still in that game somehow. So they played a decent game there. They put in a pretty good effort in that one. So I'm not going to get involved, but I'll say Riverside is up from 16 to 17, and it looks like the cash percentage might actually be coming in on the Riverside side. On the Riverside. So I'm not going to actually do it, but I would look to fade Riverside in that one if you're really gonna get degenerate and play in that game. I don't think it's that degenerate, though, to be honest. Next up is Pitt and Wisconsin, and I'm playing Pitt -2 here. I have 2 games in the 5:30 p.m. slate here, so I gave out my play already in South Florida for the 1 p.m. slates, so we're good there. But I'm going to play Pitt -2. This is one of those spots where, even though I know it's not a home unranked favorite, but this is a neutral site unranked favorite, so that's even more of an indicator. I think when you have a neutral site unranked team being favored against a ranked team, that tells you even more than the unranked team at home being a favorite over the ranked road team, because this is neutral site, man, and the odds makers are still telling you, hey, Pitt is actually the better team here over Wisconsin. And I actually agree. Pitt, I think, is flying under the radar. If you look at this, Ken Baum has Pitt as the 14th best team in the country, and Wisconsin down at 30. So, I mean, Wisconsin is good, but he has Wisconsin only 74th in defensive efficiency, has them almost equal in offensive efficiency, but Pitt 12th in the country defensively. So Pitt, one of the best defensive teams in the country. Usually you think of Wisconsin as kind of a good defensive team and balanced team, but looks like not the case so far this year. Their defense hasn't been very good. Both these teams, they don't really play at significantly different paces. They both play a little bit on the slower side. And strength of schedule-wise, I mean, not much to see there either. Both teams have kind of faced a weak schedule, but the odds makers are telling you what you need to know here, man. They're telling you Pitt is the better team, and you're giving me the better team, also the better defense, even though I know they're not getting points in this one. But this is just a suspect line, man. Pitt, they're actually down from 3.5 to 2.5 with reduced juice, and I found a 2 out there, so the line has actually dropped a little bit on them. But we see 59% of tickets on them and 77% of the cash on them, so it looks like the cash percentage is coming in on the Pitt side, and I agree with this one. And this is in that Appalachian Greenbrier tip-off in West Virginia, so this is also a more familiar environment for Pittsburgh to be in because they are basically in the Appalachians, so they don't really have to go that far to play this game in West Virginia, even though I know Wisconsin is already there because they've also both been in this tournament already. But, I mean, like I said, the odds makers are telling you what you need to know here. Both these teams are 6-0. Wisconsin's ranked. Pitt isn't. But the public is going to come in and I think, look at this, even though I just looked at the percentages, and I would expect the public percentage to be more on Wisconsin than it is. But as I always say, on pregame, when you see a smaller ticket percentage than the cash percentage on that team there, that higher cash percentage than the ticket percentage basically indicates the public side is sort of the other side. Like, the public is still putting too much weight on the other side at the very least. I mean, Wisconsin, what have they done so far? Well, the big thing they did is they beat Arizona, but I did like Wisconsin in that one. I thought that was a bad spot that Arizona was in, and that game played at Arizona's pace, and Arizona still didn't win the game. Arizona was coming off, they were maybe looking ahead to that game against Duke, and that was their first true road game, so they got caught against Wisconsin in that one. So that was the big win for Wisconsin. They came off of that, and I faded Wisconsin off of that, and they didn't play very well against Rio Grande Valley, UTRGV. And Rio Grande Valley easily covered that huge number and had chances to win the game. So that was a letdown spot, though, for Wisconsin. Then they came back and they beat up UCF in this tournament, man. This was a game that was a complete blowout on the side of Wisconsin. So that's what they're coming off of. I think they might just be feeling pretty nice about themselves after a blowout win like that. That was against a 4-1 UCF team, too, so not really a pushover of a UCF team. But look at the percentages in this game. UCF actually out-rebounded them, but they only shot 33.9% from the field and 11.8% from three. Those are ridiculous outlier low percentages there, man. So that's like unsustainable stuff. I mean, debatably, all right, yeah, maybe Wisconsin played good defense, but you saw what I just said about their defense. I mean, their defense is not anything to write home about, according to KenPom right now, ranked in the 70s in the country. So kind of surprising, actually. So this is a spot where you would expect Wisconsin's next opponent is not going to shoot that poorly against them. And meanwhile, Pitt, their last game was more of a tough game against LSU, but I mean, you might think that was a big game because it was against a big opponent, LSU, a SEC team, but Pitt was up to a 7.5-point favorite in this game. They won the game by 11, but it was a bit more of a struggle, but Pitt did wind up pulling away in this game. But I think the bettors are going to come in and look at this and think, okay, yeah, Pitt won this game, but Wisconsin won their last game in a blowout. But I'm looking at the box scores here and saying, well, look where the outlier percentages are. In this case, yeah, the outliers were on both sides, but still, Pitt only shot 29.2% from three-point range, and they still won the game because, yeah, LSU shot way low, 23.8% from three and 37.3%. Yeah, so all of those are outliers that I would expect to kind of move back up a little bit, but at least what you could say with what KenPom is telling you at the very least is that Pitt does have a good defense. So Pitt probably actually does not allow very high shooting percentages on the other side. So I think the outlier is a little bit less crazy there than it was in that Wisconsin UCF game. That UCF game, that was just an abysmal shooting performance. So give me Pitt in that one. Minus the 2 points, man. The odds makers are telling you something. Then I'm going to jump over to the Paradise Jam, which is at the same time. This is in, where the hell is this? In the Virgin Islands. There you go. My home spot in the Virgin Islands there. This is Longwood against McNeese. I'm going to lay the points with McNeese. It is up to 8.5. I know I would rather have had it under 7, and you missed the boat on that. It's up from 6 to 8.5 with juice on the 8.5, but I'm still going to do it. 54% of tickets, 70% of the cash on the side of McNeese. 7, it is a key number in basketball because it is that 3-score threshold where once a team falls down by 7, they stop intentionally fouling because it becomes a 3-possession game. So I would rather have laid 7 or less on McNeese here, but I still think this is a spot to play McNeese in this one. I mean, looking at these teams, Longwood is 6-0 to start the season, and McNeese is 3-2. And you know the public is fickle, man, and they're very oriented around what have you done for me recently? The public is extremely high time preference. It's crazy, man. The way I bet is low time preference. How crazy is that? I look at the bigger picture, man, and I don't just look at what have you done for me recently, but that's what the public looks for. They want like immediate gratification, and they're seeing McNeese is 3-2, and they're laying 8.5 against a 6-0 Longwood team. Longwood hasn't lost a game yet, so how are you giving me 8.5 points with Longwood, right? That's what the public is going to think. Give me Longwood. They're undefeated, so I don't even need them to win this game, right? It's easy. So the public probably already forgets that McNeese was a dominant Southland team last year, and they do still have some of those pieces this year as well on this team, but look at the strength of schedule, man. I mean, I can show you the schedule as well, but look at this strength of schedule here. McNeese has faced, according to KenPom, the 57th strongest schedule in the country. So they've faced a difficult schedule, and they're sitting at 97th in his rankings in the country. And they also play a slow pace, so you can keep that in mind a little bit. So I always like to look at the pacing, but this is a neutral site game as well. But the thing that you want to look at most here is that they've faced a really difficult schedule so far. Guess what? Guess who hasn't? Longwood. And Longwood is ranked down at 155, so KenPom does have them ranked lower. They play a little bit of a faster pace at 190, but these two teams are still in the bottom half pace-wise, so they both kind of like to play a slower pace, so I'm not going to look too much into that. Longwood has faced the 330th toughest schedule in the country, man. So this is a huge discrepancy in strength of schedule. Longwood basically hasn't faced anybody yet, and McNeese has faced one of the most difficult schedules so far. Well, yeah, McNeese in the 50 whatever range, strength of schedule wise, and Longwood in the bottom like 30 or so, basically in all of D1 basketball and strength of schedule. So that is telling you something there. And Longwood, the other thing about them is they can't score. KenPom has them at 210th in offensive efficiency. He's got McNeese. He's got both of these teams almost even defensively, but offensively, McNeese in the top 100. McNeese is the way better scoring team, so I like that as well. I got the better offense here, which is kind of what you want when you're laying points. Where the major difference between the two teams is that one team has a better offense than the other team, and that is McNeese. And you can see the schedule here, man. I mean, Longwood here. Look at their schedule so far. They face Randolph. Yeah, that's some Randolph right there to open the season. Who is that? Randolph. Yeah, that's right. They only won that game by 11 against a non-D1 team. They played Morgan State. Not impressive. Milwaukee, I mean, that's not a bad win. But Tennessee Martin by 2. Binghamton by 6. I mean, these are not impressive results, man. And then they face UAB, and this is one of their best wins of the season, maybe the best. They're a 7.5-point underdog, and this was in this Paradise Jam tournament. Longwood upset UAB. UAB was a 7.5-point favorite, and that was such a big win for Longwood. This was a back-and-forth battle for most of the game, and Longwood was able to put it away at the end. But look at these percentages, man. Longwood shot a bit high from field goal percentage, 51.7%. Both teams shot poorly from three-point range, but UAB shot 17.6 from 3, man. That is not going to happen again. McNeese is a good offensive team. They're not going to shoot that low from three-point range, man. So that's a major outlier. You dig into these box scores, man, you find outliers, and that's a major reason why Longwood wound up pulling off this upset is UAB had a bad shooting performance. UAB dominated the rebounds in this game, too. So Longwood may struggle on the glass a little bit against some of these teams that have more size than they do, and I think McNeese probably also does. Although I'd really have to kind of look into it because I don't know really the specific personnel. Oh, and by the way, I will say I think KenPom does have Pitt winning their game by 3. So I do like that. KenPom is really on board with that Pitt one as far as his rankings are concerned. So everything lines up there. He has McNeese only winning this game by I think 5 or 6. So that does worry me a little bit, but I think the scheduling spot plays into McNeese's hands here. And then in the South Florida game, I think he only has them winning by maybe 1. So Ken Baum, we're bucking Ken Baum a little bit here. And in my last game, I don't even remember what he has. So we are kind of bucking his rankings a little bit, but not significantly. And you just saw what like Ken Baum is leading me to believe that you should play McNeese in this one because their strength of schedule is so much more difficult. I mean, look at who McNeese has played so far. They lost to South Dakota State. South Dakota State's a pretty decent team, and they're up in the Summit League still. I think even though McNeese was a big favorite in that game, they got upset. But McNeese also played Alabama to within 8. I mean, this is a competitive McNeese team, man. If they can play Alabama to within 8, and then they beat North Texas, I mean, that's a decent win. North Texas was a pretty decent team last year. I think they're pretty good again this year, actually. And then let me see here. And then McNeese in this Paradise Jam, they just won by 8 against Illinois State as a 10.5-point favorite. So that wasn't a good performance for McNeese. You have Longwood coming off a game in this tournament where they overperformed and pulled off a big upset, whereas McNeese was a big favorite and they kind of underperformed in this game. And I think they kind of just took their foot off the gas because they had the lead for pretty much the whole game, and I think they just didn't really care anymore, and they just kind of settled in, and they really didn't let Illinois State get back in this game. So it looks kind of ugly that they only won by 8, but this is still a pretty decent game for McNeese. Illinois State shot kind of high from 3-point range too at 42.3. McNeese also kind of high at 40, but still Illinois State, I mean, probably that's a 3-point percentage you're probably not going to see their opponent, McNeese's opponent, be shooting again, and McNeese did dominate the boards in this game as well. So I think McNeese should have the edge on the glass in this game as well. And the situation sets up for it. Give me McNeese in that one. And what else we got? We're getting towards the end here. Now we're in the evening games here. I mean, you do have FAU and Seton Hall. I don't know what to say about this. This is in one of those other tournaments I already talked about. Well, Seton Hall just they beat VCU, which was actually a big upset for Seton Hall. And then they lost to Vandy kind of badly, so maybe they were in kind of a letdown spot after that. So they're going to bounce back here against FAU. I mean, it is possible. This is in the Shriners Children's Charleston Classic in Charleston, South Carolina. FAU had beaten Oklahoma State and Liberty. They beat Oklahoma State in this tournament, I think, and then they lost to Drake. Drake doing really well to start the season, man. Drake... And I thought that Drake didn't have, what's-his-face anymore, the coach's son that they had last year when they made that run into the tournament last year. I don't remember, or they were in the tournament for 2 years straight, I think, with him, with DeVries, I think was his name. I don't know if they still have him there or not. But Drake beat FAU, so FAU's coming off that game, and FAU was actually a favorite in that game still, although Drake has been playing pretty well. So FAU, they might be in more like bounce-back mode here, potentially. And they might step it up because they get to face Seton Hall. I mean, whenever you face a Big East team, I think you're going to step it up, even though I know FAU has made a name for themselves recently with, getting into the tournament 2 years in a row. But whenever you're a team in a lower conference like FAU and you get to face a Big East team like Seton Hall, you do step it up a little bit. FAU's sitting at a 2.5-point favorite, so the odds makers are telling you FAU is actually the better team. That's how bad Seton Hall is this year, man. And I don't think the public realizes that because they know Seton Hall. They know it's Big East. They know that Seton Hall almost made the tournament last year and possibly, arguably should have by some, according to some people. 50% of the tickets are evenly split, but 84% of the cash on FAU. So the cash percentage does look like it's strong on the FAU side, and I can't say that I disagree with it in that one. And like I said, I think the public is probably going to give Seton Hall more credit than they are due because they are a Big East team, and maybe give Florida Atlantic less than they're due, even though I know they made the tournament a couple of times. Last year's performance in the tournament was not as good as they got knocked out in the first round, I believe, by Northwestern, but that was a close game. What's up, Doc? The slump is not in play right now. I've been doing well, man. Longwood's mascot is, they're the Lancers. It would be funny if they're the Chubs. They're the Lancers, which is still funny because it's a big, like lance, like it's a jouster on a horse is their logo, and he's got a huge lance. So I think there is something phallic going on there. The Longwood Lancers, man. I got a long lance right there. We lance a lot. Longwood, the Viagra Dome. Viagra should sponsor whatever their arena is. I don't know what their home arena is called there. And then what else we got? spending a lot of time on college basketball, man. But college basketball, I mean, I enjoy it. Liberty and K-State are playing. This is at least an interesting line. Liberty's off to a good start, 5-1 in the Conference USA. They've been one of the better, like, mid-major teams over the, like, recent years, kind of. Liberty, I mean, they've been playing well against some good competition, I would say. FAU, they only lost by 3. Charleston is a really good scoring team, and somehow Liberty got them into a low-scoring game and really beat them up, and then held them to a really low score. So that is impressive. And then beating Louisiana, fairly impressive as well. I mean, I think Louisiana is one of the better Sun Belt teams still, probably. And Seattle's not that bad either, and they beat them too. So Liberty, not a bad team, and I think they might be kind of flying under the radar, even though you see their record. K-State has also been good at 4-1. This is also going to be in the Paradise Jam over in the Virgin Islands. Kansas State's not coming off of anything important, though. They beat George Washington. Who cares? So they might still be focused on this game. But K-State, they have not impressed so far this year, man. I don't know who this K-State team is yet this year, because they've beaten basically mid-major teams. And the one game that they played against a bigger opponent, they lost to LSU. Yes, this is a mid-major team as well against Liberty, but the odds makers are telling you that this game is not really what you think it is. The line opened K-State 1.5, and now it's up to 3.5 with juice. I saw it at 4 a little while ago. 4s are probably still out there, but that line, even at 3.5 or 4, it looks too easy to me to take Kansas State. Because what public bettor is going to come in and see Liberty, Kansas State, and see a line that's this low on Kansas State and think, oh, I want to take Liberty? When it's almost like you're just asking like to pick the winner here. The public is going to come in and want to take the Big 12 team, man, K-State. And I think they remember K-State like making a tournament run. K-State, I think, missed the tournament last year, if I'm not mistaken, didn't they? They made a good run the year before that. But I think last year they were in the NIT. I can't remember. I think they might have won the NIT. Maybe I'm completely misremembering that. It's all Mandela effect at this point. I don't know. But K-State, it just looked like they were a little bit public, but now it's flipped to tickets evenly split 50-50 and 52% of the cash on K-State. So it looks like some actual cash has come in on K-State. I'm not sure I agree with that. They've faced the weaker schedule, and the line to me looks a little bit suspect when you have a big guy not laying a huge price against a little guy like that. Where does KenPom have Kansas State? He's got them at 72nd in the country, so that's not very good and pretty weak offensively at 101. And he's got, let me see, who are they playing against? Oh, yeah, Liberty. He's got Liberty as the better team, right? Yeah. He has Liberty up at 64th, and he has Liberty slightly better, actually, on both sides of the ball. And Liberty likes to play slow. Both teams play pretty slow, but Liberty plays slower than K-State. He's got K-State with a 334th strength of schedule, very low, and Liberty up at 140. So, I mean, he's telling you what I just said. I mean, you can just look at their schedule, and you can see K-State has faced the worst, the weaker schedule. And if you like KenPom's ratings, I do agree with the Liberty side here. And if you put that much stock into his rankings, it looks like there is some value taking the Liberty side in that one. I would not disagree with doing that. What's up, Just Out? Just Out, are you like just out of the closet? You just tell everybody you're gay? You're gay, bro. So that's the way I look in that game. Kansas State against Liberty. Interesting game there, man. Some really interesting spots here. Oh, no, McNeese, the cash percentage completely flipped against me. Fuck. Man, I hate when I see that. I'm a little bit worried about that now. And now, what else we got? That's why I hate looking at trying to read college basketball lines like this. And then Texas State, Ohio is, I think, actually, this is in one of those games as well. That's the 5th place game in that Myrtle Beach tournament. Texas State's coming off a big upset of Princeton, man. So they could be in a letdown spot just because of that. Princeton was a 6.5-point favorite. Princeton has had a difficult schedule so far, but they've been getting upset by some teams here. Ohio, meanwhile, they just got back on track. They ended their losing streak with a win over Portland. They have not faced an easy schedule. UNC Asheville, nice win there. It's not a bad Asheville team. They beat James Madison, or lost to James Madison. Memphis, Middle Tennessee, as I just pointed out, is pretty decent, and they got to within 2 of Middle Tennessee. So this Ohio team is not actually as bad as they look. And then they finally beat Portland, which is a game they should have won. Portland not that good, even though Portland did step it way up in against Oregon in that one game I pointed out not too long ago. So this Looks like a spot where I would want to lean to the Ohio side in this one. Texas State coming off a big upset win over Princeton, whereas Ohio, this is more of a just get-right game. They were a 7.5-point favorite in that game. I think Ohio State maybe flying under the radar a little bit here. The public may look at this and think, oh, Texas State just beat Princeton. They have the better record, so Texas State has got to be the better team, right? But the odds makers are telling you they're not. With Ohio up from 2 to 3.5 now. 50% of the tickets on Ohio, but 53% of the cash on Texas State. I don't know if I agree with any of that, really. Oh, man, my lean on Princeton looks like it was correct, by the way. They're just crushing Portland right now. So I think I was correct on that one. So Ohio, yeah, I mean, the odds makers are telling you they're the better team. So that is the way I would look in that game, despite what the cash percentage looks like. I'm not going to put that much stock into that, and I'm almost sure the Ken Palm has Ohio as the better team here. He has them ranked 158. They play the 70th fast pace, by the way. They're more of an offensive than a defensive team there. And Texas State, he's got down at 157. Or no, he has Texas State above them at 157. Texas State plays a slower pace, so this could be a pacing collision here. So whichever team winds up controlling the pace could maybe win out here. He does have Texas State with a slightly higher strength of schedule. I don't really care when there's not much of a difference there. He has Ohio as the better offense, like I said, but Texas State as the better defense and slower team. So I don't know what to make of that, really. So I'm just staying off that game. And then the other game I'm on is the second to last game here. I'm taking the points with Southern Miss plus 6.5 in this one against Montana State. I know it's going to be a weird environment for them to go out to Montana State. So that's the one hesitation I have. Montana State's up from 5.5 to 6.5. Montana State has won that Big Sky Conference multiple years in a row, man. I don't want to say they've been the best team in that conference, though, but they have won the Big Sky tournament a couple years in a row and made the NCAAA tournament. But that big dude with the goggles that they had there those last couple of years, I don't think he was there anymore last year. I think, well, obviously, if he wasn't there last year, he's gone at the very least. So Montana State has 80% of the tickets on them, and 77% of the cash is on the other side on Southern Miss. So it looks like there is some market agreement with me on Southern Miss in this game here. Obviously, I agree with this. Southern Miss is coming off a game where they lost badly to South Dakota State. But South Dakota State, I mean, a pretty good team, and they had to go on the road to do it. So that's one thing is that Southern Miss is already kind of in that like Big Sky territory out there. They're already out in like the North Midwest area, kind of the Mountain West area almost out there. So they're already in South Dakota. So having to go from there out to Montana is not as bad travel. And that means they did also get kind of an unfamiliar road game out of the way already. And they got blasted in this game. They're a 6.5-point dog, and they got absolutely crushed in this game. They were losing by 30 for a big chunk of this game and almost lost by 30. But Southern Miss shot 34.7% from the field, 20% from three. I mean, those are outliers. That's not going to happen again. South Dakota State, 61% from the field. That's not going to happen again either. But this is just a total mismatch. South Dakota State, I'm assuming, is also significantly better than Montana State. If they're at 164, according to KenPom, Montana State's down at 191. So this should be an easier game for Southern Miss. Southern Miss, I mean, they're not a good offensive team, but they're sitting at 241 in KenPom's rankings. The one thing I don't love is that Southern Miss plays very fast at 19 in tempo. So they like to play really fast, and Montana State does not. They play at 203rd in tempo. So that's one thing that gives you a little bit of hesitation, but Montana State's still actually not that good defensively, though. So, and if Montana State tries to slow the game down, at least the good thing about it is you're still getting points. So when a team that likes to play the slower pace is laying points, sometimes that's not really the team that you want to be on. You want to lay points typically with like the faster paced team. So even if they control the pace, I still think Southern Miss might be live here. But the main crux of this is, look at what Montana State just did, man. I know they face a difficult schedule, so the fact that they're 1-4, I mean, is not really indicative of what they actually are. But, I mean, they lost to Wisconsin. Wichita's not that bad either. They played 4 of these games on the road. They lost all 4 of their games are on the road, but they have not won a game against a Division I team yet. Their only win was against a D2 team in Northwest Indian. Excuse me, whatever that is. But, yes, they have faced a tough schedule. All of these games are on the road. They lost to Denver. Denver's a bit of a weaker team than these other opponents. So they did lose against a weaker team. But look what they just did in their last game, man. This is a huge game for them. They went into Northwestern, into Evanston, Indiana. And unlike Northwestern's football team, Northwestern's basketball arena is not being renovated, I don't think. So I think they did play. Yeah, you can see the video here. They did play at Northwestern's arena, I'm pretty sure. 14.5-point favorite is what Northwestern was. Montana State, that's a big step-up game for them when they get to play a Big Ten team like that. As a 14.5-point underdog, Montana State, they were in this game the whole way pretty much. They were winning early in the second half. They were winning in the second half as well, and they were behind by only a little, and they tied the game in the final minute of the game. They had it tied, and then they lost the game right at the end there. That's a brutal way to lose that game. So if you're Montana State, how do you bounce back from that? And they shot, I think, too high from three-point range. They're 40.9%, so I expect that to regress. Northwestern did out-rebound them as expected. Northwestern only shot 25% from three, so I expect kind of more of a regression back to the mean as far as the three-point shooting against Montana State is concerned as well. So I like Southern Miss there, plus 6.5. And then we got Drake and Vandy. I'll just talk about briefly, and then I'll go to the other sports. Drake, they've been playing real well. They still haven't lost a game. They're 5-0. They just beat Miami and FAU. So now is this going to be a spot where they finally don't play well? I don't know, because they're playing against Vandy. This is an SEC team they're playing who's also undefeated, and this is the championship game in this Shriners Children's Classic. So I know these early season tournaments, they don't matter, but once you get to the championship in the tournament, you want to win the game. So I think both teams are still going to have reason to actually show up in this game. So this makes it a hard read. Vandy is coming off beating Seton Hall, but I just said Seton Hall's pretty down this year, but it was an easier game for them. Whereas Drake has kind of been playing opponents that are more difficult, I guess. Although beating Nevada is not easy. They were probably actually favored. Yeah, they were against Vandy by 2.5. So, I don't know what to think about this game. Both teams should be focused. This should be one of the better games on the slate here. Vandy's up from 3-4 with juice, but 54% of tickets on them and 64% of the cash on the other side on Drake. So the cash percentage is actually taking Drake here. With the public maybe just coming in and thinking, even though they should know Drake's name from being in the tournament the last couple of years, but I guess the public still wants the SEC name there more so than not. With the cash percentage on Drake and the ticket percentage on Vandy slightly, but the line has moved up on Vandy a bit, so it looks like some money came in and did that, so I don't know. That's difficult, and like I said, I think Drake may be in the slightly more difficult spot because they're coming off some bigger wins, really, than at least Vandy is in their most recent game, even though beating a Big East team, you might consider that to be big, but Seton Hall is down this year, and I think probably Vandy had to have been the favorite. Yeah, they were up to a 5.5-point favorite in that game, so take from that what you will. That's the college basketball slate. We'll move on to NBA and NHL, and I don't have much to say in those, so it'll be quick to end this. Only the gays have closets, that's true. Northwest Indians get to play Florida, Illinois. Yeah, that's going to be a great game, man. Florida, Illinois, I think, is actually playing today. Let me see. Are they? Maybe they're not. I thought I saw them on tap here. They are. They're playing against Florida Gulf Coast, so enjoy that game, which is down. Florida Gulf Coast is down from 6 to 4.5. They're actually hosting this tournament, though. That's a tournament in Fort Myers, Florida, but it's that's hosted by Florida Gulf Coast, I believe, because they're in Fort Myers, so I think it is in their arena. Moving on to NBA, finally. College basketball, there's just a lot that I like to talk about, man. NBA, there's not a whole lot I'm going to talk about here. What do we really have to say here in some of these games? Washington, Indiana, what can you say about this game? Washington, they're coming off a game against the Celtics where they played kind of competitively somewhat, but the Celtics were in a big letdown spot off of that win over Cleveland. So I expected the Celtics to not have total focus in this game. Washington was winning the game early, but the Celtics, they got hit in the mouth and they turned it on and won the game, although they didn't cover the game. I had mentioned I leaned to Washington to cover the game in that one. Still, that was a big step-up game for Washington, and they were still kind of hanging in that game late in the game, and they were still within 4 points in the final few minutes of that game. So even though the Celtics won by double digits, it was actually a little bit closer than that. So is that going to put Washington in a bit of a hangover spot coming off of that? Yeah, it might. In Indiana, they're coming off a more ugly loss, kind of, I would say, against Milwaukee, but that was still a big game nonetheless because Milwaukee still got Giannis and whatever. That was a bigger game for Milwaukee, though, because it was playoff revenge against Indiana. Indiana was the team that eliminated Milwaukee last year, but the main reason I'm not going to wind up playing this game, because it all seems like, oh, that sets up nicely to play Indiana here, right? Because Washington's in a hangover spot. Yeah, but Indiana's returning home from a road trip, although I know it didn't take them far. Toronto, Houston, Milwaukee. Not a long road trip, and they're just coming back home now. So as far as return home spots are concerned, it's not that bad a spot. So I think I still would lean to the Pacers in this one, but I'm not going to do it. And you're laying a big price with them. They're up from 11.5 to 12.5. And it might look a little bit pricey because Indiana also has not been good this year. They're 6-10, but Washington is so bad and has like maybe the worst record in basketball at 2-12 that the public still wants nothing to do with Washington at all. 90% of the tickets on Indiana, 93% of the cash also on Indiana, though. So there may be some professional and public agreement on the Indiana side of that one. I don't know what to think about that. The Clippers and Sixers, this game, man, I mean, I don't know what to think about this game either. The Clippers, they're coming off a decent win, a nice blowout win over Sacramento. Now they have to fly to the East Coast to start a road trip against Philadelphia, and they got Boston up next. So they're going to overlook Philadelphia? Maybe. I could see LA overlooking Philadelphia in this game, and the Clippers may overlook them just because Boston up tomorrow is a much bigger game. But I guess the issue I have with that is that usually teams are focused when they start a road trip. And when you won some games at home like that and you go out on the road trip, the momentum tends to continue into that first game on the road trip. So I don't really want to bank on the Clippers looking ahead in this spot, although they very well might because the Celtics are the much bigger team. Philadelphia hasn't done anything right. But the other thing you have to be aware of in this game is Joel Embiid is hurt again. He's not playing in this game. He didn't play in the previous game either. And I think that was the injured player theory spot again for Philadelphia. You can go look and make sure that was the case. Yeah. Embiid had a big game against Memphis, got injured again, so then he didn't play against Brooklyn, and it was an injured player spot, and Philadelphia won the game in blowout fashion against Brooklyn. So that might actually be good because it might end their losing momentum. But now the problem is they're facing a second game in a row now without Embiid. And usually after you put in a big effort in that first game with that injured player out, you tend to regress a little bit in that next game. So maybe they will, although maybe they'll be focused because they need wins badly at this point. And it is a decent Clippers team with James Harden coming into their house. And that means this is the James Harden battle, man. Although they already had that this year. They already played this year, and Philadelphia got absolutely blown out against the Clippers on the road. So LA might overlook Philadelphia for that reason too. Not only that Philadelphia has a bad record, but LA did already crush them at home. So LA got that kind of Harden battle out of the way where Harden got to face his former team there, where I think Harden got traded last year, right? I forget. Maybe it was the year before that. I think it was last year. So that might have been the first matchup between Harden's former Philly team and Harden's current Clipper team there. So now this is the second matchup between the two. So that might mean Philly might actually have reason to step it up for that reason too, because they got blown out by the Clippers. And it might be a little bit more reason for the Clippers to overlook this game. Clippers have flipped from a 2-point dog to a 2-point favorite, but that is because of the Embiid situation, I'm pretty sure. I think the line has moved because Embiid is out. I think that was most of the reason why it moved. And then so I think you put more weight into the percentages in that case because most of the line move was to account for the injury. 66% of tickets and only 53% of the cash on the Clippers. So the public is coming in on the Clippers, and it looks like more of the cash is actually going against that. And I might actually agree with it and still lean to the 76ers in that game based on everything I just said, but I'm not going to bank on it. Yeah, relax about the engines, man. Focus on the juice. That's right. We're focusing on the jungle juice here. And then what other games did I want to talk about here? Toronto-Cleveland I will talk about because I think Toronto's in a bad spot here in my opinion, man. Cleveland, they surprisingly had no problem bouncing back from suffering their first loss in that huge step-up game against Boston where I was at the game. It was a fun game, man. I would have rather liked Boston to just, finish the blowout because the Celtics were blowing them out of the building for a lot of that game, but whatever. It wound up being an entertaining game, and the Celtics won the game, so it was fun. Cleveland, off of that, I expected them to be in, hangover mode for sure. They were in a back-to-back off of that, and they still blew out New Orleans. And New Orleans is just a team that has not been healthy this year, man. I mean, they have not had a full roster this entire year. But that means when New Orleans, if they do get healthy and they do have a complete roster at some point, they're going to become a little bit more dangerous, man. It may fly under the radar a little bit, but Cleveland, because that's what they're coming off of. Now they have a few days off. They're well rested. They don't have this game surrounded by anything. So I kind of actually expect Cleveland to be focused in this game. So I actually would lean to laying the points with Cleveland in this one. And look at what Toronto's just done. They also played at Boston and lost in overtime. They played a real difficult recent schedule, man. They beat Indiana. That's a big win in the Siakam battle. They're beating the team that made the conference finals last year in Indiana. And then they pulled off an upset against Minnesota. And now they're starting a road trip, though, so they do get to carry that momentum out on the road. So, again, like I just said with whatever team it was there, the Clippers, I think usually you do maintain focus. Usually you do maintain that, like, momentum when you win at home and then you carry it out into the first game on the road. Sometimes it's not a letdown spot, although that was a big win over Minnesota, man. Only a 6.5-point underdog, but that might put Toronto in a little bit of a letdown spot here. So I don't know, actually. This is a tough read for me. And now Cleveland's actually down from 13 to 11.5, 89% of tickets on them, but 58% of cash on the side of the Raptors. So a lot of market indicators on the side of the Raptors in this one, and I am not convinced that I actually agree with that. My one play, though, in the NBA is the Miami Heat -3. You knew it was going to be one of the games I didn't talk about yet. And it's not that late game. It is the Heat. I'm going to lay the points with the Heat here. Although the Heat look public, 64% of tickets and only 52% of the cash now on them. But when I looked like a little while ago, they had the cash percentage on them, and maybe it'll change again by the time the game goes off. I don't know, because they moved up a little bit from 2.5 to 3. And in the NBA, I don't think 3 is so important that it would be like a setup where the professional bettors want to come in and drive that line up to 3 in the NBA. This isn't the NFL. And then come in and take the +3 on the other side. I don't know that that's really what happened there. But I'm going to play on the Miami Heat in this one. This is a fade of Dallas in some ways here. Dallas, they're coming off a big win where I was on Dallas. They went into Denver and they beat Denver. Look at this stretch of games there where they won at Oklahoma City. I thought this was a bad sandwich spot for them off of that, and they still blew out New Orleans. And that New Orleans team just, like I said, they're very injured, but Dallas just did not let up in that game, really. And then they went into Denver, and I played them in that game, and they beat Denver with Jokic back and without Luka. On the road, Dallas was able to do that. Now you know what's going to happen, man. Now this is Dallas' second game without Luka, I'm pretty sure, right? Because this is either he's going to come back and it's a reverse injured player theory. No, he's not back. I mean, that's why if he was back, the line would not be Miami 3.5. So now it's that second game without Luka. So as I always say, you play well in the injured player spot. That first game back, that was an injured player spot with Luka, his first game out, and it was Jokic returning to Denver's lineup. So it was a bad spot for Denver, and that way, too, it was the reverse, not injured player spot, but the reverse star player being out spot there. So it was a bad spot. Those spots lined up nicely in both directions there, which is why I played Dallas in that game. And by the way, I actually looked it up, and I found out that Jokic, his personal reasons for being out was paternity leave. So I would actually call him a pussy for that. I like Jokic, though. I mean, he's my dude, but that's just a pussy move, man, to miss a bunch of games because you just had a new son or whatever. And I don't think that's his first kid either, but do what the Bruins do, man, where you had, who was it? I think it was Charlie Coyle on the Bruins. He had a son and he was playing fucking hockey that night, man, in the fucking playoffs. That's what a man does. Sorry, Jokic. I can't justify being out for multiple NBA games in a row like that. I am sorry. But anyway, back to Dallas here. This is going to be that second game without Luka. So usually the team, after they put in a lot of energy and they play really well in that game, that was a big, nice upset for them over Denver. Usually you take a step back after that, and they have to fly out of elevation with only one day off now down to the Pacific Coast. I know they don't have a bigger game up next, but still, this looks like it's going to be a bit of a letdown and hangover spot there for those reasons. You're looking at the Heat laying points as a 6-7 team against a 9-7 Mavs team. So to me, it looks like the public would want to come in on the Mavs here, thinking there might be value taking the Mavs, even though they know they're without Luka. But look what they just did without Luka, right? They just beat Denver without Luka. So of course they're going to be able to cover as an underdog against the Heat, right? That's what I think the public would think. But obviously that's not what I think. In Miami, they don't really have any injuries we really care about. I mean, Rozier, decent guard, but doesn't really matter that much. Butler is in there, I believe. He's playing. And look at Miami's schedule, man. I think Miami is in a good spot here. They returned home in their last game against Philadelphia, and they did not suffer a bad return home spot here. They beat Philadelphia anyway, with Philadelphia still being a team that's in turmoil and, have guys in and out of the lineup, so whatever. But that was a nice win because usually in that return home spot, you're at least very distracted, so I thought that could be a distracted spot for Miami with a lot of days off there and maybe looking ahead to Dallas. Here, the fact that Philadelphia has just been so bad and so injured this year, but Miami blew them out of the building, man. So that shows me something, that even in a bad return home spot of a long road trip that took them out to like the mountain time zone pretty much or whatever, they still played well. And now they have a bunch of days off. They're the much more well-rested team, man. You got a huge rest disparity here where Dallas is traveling and only had 1 day rest. You got Miami with 4 days, 5 days rest and not traveling. And you might say, well, that's too much rest, right? I would agree with you if they were on a win streak and they lost that win streak, but I don't really think this is a momentum stopper here because they were alternating wins and losses. So all they did was have one win against a weak opponent going into that rest. So I think they are going to be focused on Dallas here. I think they'll be ready for it. So give me the Miami Heat in that one, -3. And then finally, I am playing the NHL game as well. Yeah, playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. And then we'll talk about NHL, and then I'll wrap up the show, man. NHL, there's one game, and it is Utah against Toronto, and I am playing the Utah side in this one. I'm just going to take a shot on the money line here at +160, man. A lot of hockey underdogs, I do that because I don't like to play the spread as much because you're playing the spread. If you play the underdog at +1.5 goals, you're probably going to be laying like -150, -160 to do that. So if you're going to do that, I would split the bet and put half of it on that and then half of it on the money line. And obviously, if you're playing a hockey underdog like this, at least some of your bet better be on that money line. But I'm just going to fire and take a shot with the money line just straight up, which I do in hockey more often than baseball or something like that because it's a closer sport, right? Hockey is a lower scoring sport. So that underdog, if they're going to be in that game, they have a better chance to win that game outright than the baseball team does. Toronto's down from -190 to -178, so some movement in the market against Toronto. 96% of tickets on them, but 100% of the cash on them. So all we can really glean from that is that, yeah, Toronto's definitely going to be public here. The Utah hype is over, man. I mean, they were hyped to start the season as they were that new team, but they're really just the Arizona Coyotes, and now they're below 500. Nobody's going to pay attention to them anymore. And this Toronto Maple Leafs team has been playing real well recently, but that's the reason why I'm going to fade them, man. I think now we're at a point where the stock is too high on Toronto. And Toronto, look at what they did in their recent games, man. They have won 6 of their last 7, but look at these last 3 wins. They won at Washington in overtime. Then they beat Edmonton, the Stanley Cup finalist out of the Western Conference from last year, beat them in overtime. Then they didn't suffer a letdown off of that either. With a couple days off, they were rested at least. And they beat Vegas as well. And they're doing this alternating Wall and Stolarz at goalie as well, as both of them have actually been playing pretty well. So it's probably going to be Stolarz in this one, but I don't know because they've had 3 days off now. So I don't know which goalie it's going to be, and I don't really care in this spot because this is a sandwich spot, man. I mean, look at this. They're coming off 3 big wins in a row on a 3-game win streak, and now they have 3 days off. And when you're on a big win streak like that, you don't want to have a bunch of days off, man. It's going to disrupt your momentum. You're staying at home and just basking in probably the press clippings, and you're listening to the local media talking about how awesome you are. And it's a big hockey town in Toronto, man. So they're probably basking in all of that and enjoying, this winning with their winning ways recently here. But they got to try to focus on this game and on Utah. But I think it's going to be difficult to do so. And they have all that stuff going on where they've won a bunch of these big games in a row. Everybody's hyping them up. And then right after Utah, they go out on the road and they face the returning champ Florida Panthers for the first time this year, I think. And then they face Tampa after that for the second time this year. And they did beat Tampa the first time. Toronto seems to play decently against Tampa. But this is a sandwich spot, man. Florida. It's a huge game up next. I think Toronto could easily have their momentum slowed by having too many days off here and could overlook this Utah team. And this Utah team, they're in the middle of a road trip, and they've already been out in the Eastern time zone. Now, they started the road trip and lost to Boston. I played Boston in that one. That was the fired coach spot for Boston. And Boston, hey, they're 2-0 with the interim coach, baby. If you saw Tower Gang, you saw my man on the street interview. I was interviewed outside of the Garden before the Celtics game. by one of the local news stations here, and they were talking about the firing of Boston's coach, and they cut out my live reaction because I didn't know he'd been fired. I went, yes, and like everybody else was reacting, saying it was a bad move, and I was like, hell yeah, but all they left in was me saying, I think it's going to spark the team, and they're going to win, which I was right about it. So, hey, my man on the street take, I got that correct. But anyway, back to Utah. I think they're in a much better spot, man, because they're already in the Eastern time zone, so the fact that they're in the middle of a road trip isn't that bad. The only issue is that, yeah, they're playing a third game in 4 days, all in different cities, so that does worry me a little bit. And, you know, I don't like to play games like that typically. I'm not going to do it because they're at the rest disadvantage, but they will have a fresh goalie in net. It will be Ingram in this one because it's a back-to-back, and Vejmelka played the last two. Vejmelka has been the better of the two goalies this year, though, but Ingram was their better goalie as the Coyotes last year, though, so it's not like Ingram doesn't know what he's doing out there. So I think that's fine. They're going to have the more rested goalie in there. I'll go with that. So at least there's that. So they are coming off a back-to-back, but they kind of had an easier game then, and that win over Pittsburgh is going to serve to break this loss streak. That's good for them to break that loss streak, man. And they lost to Vegas and Washington there, and even Boston's not really that bad. And that Vegas loss was a letdown spot because they were coming off beating Carolina, which was a huge win. So you can kind of explain why they lost some of these games. And so Utah, that recent run of losses wasn't even really that damning. So, and even their other losses here against Winnipeg and Vegas again, Nashville is not even that bad either. You have to go back to this stretch here where they lost to like San Jose. That was really the egregious loss that they had, and way back to Anaheim. So this Utah team, I think maybe they're still not as bad as maybe they look. So I like all that, even though, yes, they're in a back-to-back, but that game against Pittsburgh was easy, man. I mean, this was not a game that really I don't think a grinding game that really was close late in the game. They were already up 3-1, 4-1 fairly early in the third period. The game was over, man. So even though, yeah, there were actually a lot of hits in this game, man, so I am a little bit worried about that, the fact that it was a physical game, but I'm still going to do it, man. I think the spot is too bad for Toronto. I think it's a sandwich spot, and if you're going to give us extra value because the rest spot is bad for Utah, which it is, all right, I'll just take it, give it to me. I think it's a worse spot. I think that win for Utah should serve to like start some new momentum for them, even though, yes, they're on the back-to-back, but I will this is like maybe one of the only situations where I'm going to actually play on a team that is in a back-to-back. So recapping one more time before I get out of here, man, my NFL plays, you can go watch my NFL video coming up in an hour, in an hour. Indianapolis Colts plus 7.5, and then the night game, Rams plus 3. College basketball, South Florida minus 2.5, which is coming up, I believe, in an hour as well. McNeese minus 8.5, Pitt minus 2, Southern Miss plus 6.5, NBA Miami Heat minus 3, and hockey taking a shot with it, Utah plus 160. And the worst case, they lose the game, man, and you really don't have to pay much. Like I play everything to try to win like $300. So if you're making that bet to win 300, you only have to bet like whatever it is, like 160, 170, something, whatever. I can't do the math off the top of my head there, but whatever it is. So you're not losing as much in doing that. So I like that. Thanks everybody for hanging out for a Sunday morning show like this. Go watch my NFL video from last night if you want to see my analysis. It was about an hour long, so there's still actually time if you want to get that analysis, but at least you know what my plays are, and you can go back and see the analysis later if my plays don't get completely clobbered, but I do think my analysis is decent. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, so hopefully. Everybody, thanks for hanging out, man. Andrew, Doc, Nate, just out of the closet. Yeah, thanks for hanging out, everybody. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Follow the Tower Gang podcast, patreon.com/Tower Gang. You get live pre-show, post-show, bonus content. We're going to be setting up a Patreon RSS feed, so you get to subscribe and actually have it in your podcast catcher finally, and it will include pre-show and post-show, I believe. We'll just have everything in there, so if you want it that way, we will have that soon as well, and that's going to do it for me, man. I think Tower Gang Toad, of course. Go Tower Gang, baby. Have a good one. Let's have a good Sunday. Enjoy the football game today, especially in a lot of college basketball, which I do love that as well. So, peace out, everybody. Have a good day.